as I said in a previous video, I'm doing a couple of videos today, so I'm still 36 weeks and 2 days. And in this video, I'm going to share my birth story about my first birth experience with my son, Aidan. Now, just to let you know, this is not scripted, as I've mentioned previously, so I apologize if it's not particularly succinct. So I might end up rambling a little. I will try to be as succinct as I can. Okay, so where shall I start? I think just to give it a little bit of context, we had some difficulty falling pregnant before we had Aidan. And it wasn't for a particularly long period of time. So I think it took us 16 months or 18 months to fall pregnant. But we had gotten to the point where we were starting to investigate why, and we were seeing a specialist. And I'd had some exploratory surgery to see if there was an explanation for it. So there was a lot of, emotion around finally being pregnant and having this much awaited for baby. And, like when the labor came. So just to rewind a little bit, before I went into labor, during my pregnancy, I did attend hospital classes, and I was very keen to learn about birth and about how I could have a good experience. So from what I remember, I mean, this was 9 years ago now. From what I remember, I already had sort of like a foundational belief that our bodies are designed to do this and are designed to give birth. I don't think I really fully understood how my body worked, which would have been helpful. But I did believe that, women, we're amazing and our bodies are meant to do this, and it's all, natural. And I really wanted a, inverted commas, natural birth. And my concept of a natural birth at the time was unmedicated. I wanted to be able to get through this birth without needing too much assistance, and just having a lovely experience, becoming a mother. And okay, so I attended the hospital classes. Now I do want to tell you a tiny bit about those hospital classes, because and this isn't to bag out hospital classes, but this is just, my experience was that I didn't get a whole lot out of the classes. And I found, I'm sure they were a little bit helpful, but when it came to the actual labor, I didn't really feel like I had a lot to take with me from the classes. So one example was, we saw this video of a couple who were in early labor, and I don't know if it showed the end part of the birth, but it did particularly talk about, the beginning parts of labor. And I remember seeing them go for a walk and, do some swaying. And anyway, so I had this concept, okay, so we've got to go for a walk, we've got to do some swaying. And I was really, really eager to learn. Like, I have to emphasize that. So I went into those classes with a notebook and pen, and I wanted to learn as much as I could, and I was taking notes. And that was, my way of learning about birth. I naively didn't think to look up any other classes or find a book from the library even, or, a bookstore. I'm not sure why, but it just never occurred to me to, find a book about birth or whatever it is. So the hospital classes were it. That was my entire educational experience about birth. Anyway, so when labor started for me, it was around about 3 in the morning. Like, it was really early. It was still dark, obviously. And I just remember thinking, oh, I've got to do what I learned in the class, and that's go for a walk and do some swaying. And so we went for a walk at 3 in the morning, and was just, now I think it's kind of funny because if it goes for a walk at 3 in the morning. You don't need to go for a walk at 3 in the morning. So now I understand, after, you know, giving birth 3 times and doing hypnobirthing and teaching hypnobirthing and teaching, being a childbirth educator as well. Do not, like, if it's nighttime, do what you would normally do at night. So rest as much as you can. If you need to, have a shower, or, you know, whatever it is for comfort, but, you know, keep everything low key, quiet. You know, it's dark. Do what you would do at nighttime. If it's daytime, then go for that walk or do some swaying, or even go shopping, or whatever it is you feel like it. But anyway, it was just kind of funny that we kind of got in there and were very eager to follow those steps, and it was totally out of context. Anyway, so we went for a walk. We did some swaying, 3 in the morning, got home. You know, we rang the hospital a couple of times, and they're very keen to help you stay at home as long as you can. But being a first-time mum and being, you know, just not really knowing what to do, I did seek reassurance from the hospital and from my care providers. Now, unfortunately for me, even though I was on the caseload program, which is where you have you have an assigned midwife, so I had a relationship with the midwife. She wasn't available that particular day, and she had warned me that was just one day she couldn't make it. And my battery is going low, so just 1 second. Okay, anyway, so my midwife that I had supporting me throughout you know, all my antenatal appointments, she wasn't available. So that certainly, I think, affected how I felt. It was, you know, nothing against her, because she was wonderful, but just not having that person that I knew, I think, did affect how, like, the fear levels. But anyway, we eventually, I just remember being in the lounge room and sort of kind of you know, kneeling on the floor and being on the couch and just going, Mark, I don't know what to do. I just need to go to the hospital. So we decided to go to the hospital. And this is a very common thing for first-time mothers, particularly if you haven't done like a hypnobirthing course, or, you know, like some kind of quality childbirth course that helps you feel equipped and ready for birth and gives you some tools to use. It's very common to go into the hospital quite early. And so that's what was happening. I went in and I was probably only 2 or 3 centimeters. And that's not a terrible issue, but they really encourage you to stay at home as long as you can. And 2 or 3 centimeters may not necessarily be established labor. It's very early. Anyway, so we were in there, and we hopped in the shower, and I was finding that really comforting. But it basically, for every contraction, I was getting up, like I was sitting in the chair, like the shower chair, to rest. And then during the contraction, I'd get up and lean against the chair. And in my mind, I think I might have even been saying it out loud. I was like, come on, baby, come on, baby. And I think I had this expectation that it really would progress a lot faster. Anyway, so there was a shift change after a few hours, because it was, you know, the early hours of the morning. So at 8 o'clock, there was a shift change. We got a new midwife, and all the midwives were really nice, I have to say. But they were women I didn't know. And I think that really affected how much I was able to listen to their suggestions, because there wasn't that relationship of trust. I didn't know who they were. And so it was hard for me to, I remember in particular, the midwife that was with us for the most part of the labor, she was saying, you know, you need to relax. You need to, you're fighting it. And I just didn't listen, or I heard what she was saying, but part of it was I didn't know how to apply what she was saying. But I think a part of it was that I was blocking what she was saying, because I was like, I don't know you. What do you, you know? So there wasn't that relationship of trust, and that is just so important, I believe, to help you have a smooth labor. Anyway, so it was actually a very long labor. Baby was posterior. So often when babies are posterior, that means the back of their head, like this part of their head, is facing, is like against your back, instead of, like, they're meant to be facing your back. So their face towards your back, rather than the back of their head towards your back. And, oh, and sorry, I shouldn't say that they're meant to be doing that. I mean that that's the most ideal, or the optimal position. So my baby was, or Aidan, was not in an optimal position. He was in a posterior position. And often what babies will do is they won't come out posterior, but what happens is during the labor, they'll just take their sweet time turning around into a more optimal position, into an anterior position. Anyway, so he was posterior, and this meant a long labor for me. It's particularly for first-time mums. It often correlates with a long labor. Maybe for, you know, second or third or fourth time mums, it doesn't matter so much what the position is, because your body's sort of already primed, knows what it's doing. It's done this before, and it all just works a bit more efficiently. But that first time, yeah, it's not fun having a posterior labor. And it was really long. We basically exhausted all our options. You know, we were in the shower, then we were out of the shower, and then we eventually swapped to another room that had a bath. So we did all the active birth stuff. We had the bean bag, and I just wasn't coping anymore. I was feeling really frightened from how the contractions were feeling. They were intense, and I'm very hesitant to describe specifically how they felt, because I don't want to scare anyone. But it was deeply traumatic how they were feeling for me. And when a contraction was finishing, I was panicking at the end of a contraction, because I was already scared about the next contraction happening. So I was just in a really bad place, like my mindset, and emotionally, I was just not feeling, I was feeling really scared. So it wasn't a pleasant, it wasn't a pleasant experience, and it was really quite emotional, because I remember, you know, crying and saying, I just want to be a mum. And it was just, you know, like the midwife was lovely. She said, you already are a mum, and you know, she was trying to reassure me, but like I said, it was just a really intense experience. And we tried the gas, and then we tried it was probably pethidine at the time, and then we eventually went with having an epidural, because I had gotten up to 5 centimeters, but I wasn't moving beyond 5 centimeters. And a lot of that was probably to do with me being so tense and so afraid. And just like the midwife was saying, you know, she was saying, you're fighting it, you've got to relax, which is absolutely true, but it didn't help in the moment, because I didn't know how to relax, and I didn't know how to not feel this feeling, these contractions. So we eventually got the epidural, and we had an amazing anaesthetist. Like, he was just really supportive and very comforting. I remember him doing the, you know how they have to tell you all the risks and stuff before you consent. And I just remember thinking, just do it. So I was just really, yeah, I did need the assistance by that point. Now, what was interesting about it, though, is I wasn't coping at all with these contractions, and I mean, like, at all, and making a lot of noise, and, you know, feeling really terrified during this whole process. And yet, when they did the epidural, you need to stay completely still. Like, it is, they obviously know what they're doing, but there is a high risk compared to not having, you know, a big needle shoved into your spine. So you need to, you know, follow their instructions, and I had to stay completely still as he was inserting the epidural. And during that time, I had 2 contractions, and I was able to stay completely focused and completely still, even though these contractions were happening. And that, I really helped, like afterwards, after I was able to process the experience and look for, you know, the positive, because in the moment, it just felt like a whole lot of negative. But once I processed it and I looked back at that moment and I thought, I realized, wow, I can do this. If I could handle those 2 contractions, it was just a mindset thing. So in that moment, I really wanted the epidural, and I was able to just stay completely still and deal with the sensations and the contractions. So there was a lot of relief after the epidural went in. And I was very lucky that, but by lucky, I just mean that I have read and heard of birth stories where, you know, occasionally the epidural doesn't work very well, or, you know, so the woman may still be feeling some discomfort or pain when the contractions come. And so it doesn't give a whole lot of relief in some rare circumstances. And sometimes, like once you have the epidural, you are sort of stuck on the bed. And so all you have to do at that point is just wait. And I was lucky because my body just opened. Once the epidural was in, they had the Synto as well, which is the synthetic oxytocin to stimulate the uterus. And, you know, so I basically had all the drugs then. So I went from wanting a completely natural birth to having all the drugs. But at the same time, the plus to all of this was that my body did open, and, you know, and by my body, I mean my cervix, it opened and we were ready to have a baby. And, you know, my heart breaks for those who have gone through all that and then had the epidural, and then for whatever reason, it's still a long process, and maybe their body takes a long time to open, or maybe it doesn't open. You know, like everyone responds differently to the drugs and whatever. So they may still end up having a cesarean, or, but I didn't. I had my body opened, my cervix opened, and then we were ready to push. Okay, push, and they were basically. I was a lot calmer now, because once we took the pain out of it, I was able to sort of refocus and go, okay, that was, I was a little bit shell-shocked by the experience, but I was happy to have the pain relief. But once you're open, I mean, that's one thing, but if the baby doesn't come down, if you can't push that baby down, then there's only one way to get the baby out, and that's a cesarean. And they did start talking about the possibility of needing a cesarean. And I remember saying to my husband at the time, I said to him, oh, well, I gave it my best try. Like, it was almost like I was ready to just give up and go, whatever. So, because sort of by that point, I didn't care. I just wanted the baby out. However, luckily, at some point there was another shift change. So we got another midwife, and this was the midwife who ended up being there at the birth. So we had the baby soon after. And this is the midwife that I chose to have for my next 2 births. So she's been at the actual births of all 3 of my children. And I have to say, I always kind of get a bit teary when I think about this moment. But when she walked into the room, when they had the shift change, there was something about her. Gosh, sorry. Anyway, all right. There was something about her, and whenever I've described it, it was like a ray of sunshine walked into the room. And for whatever reason, I connected with her in a way that I didn't connect with the other midwives, even though they were lovely. And all of a sudden, instead of having this defeatist attitude, like, oh, well, whatever, just, get the baby out, she helped me to recapture my my belief in myself. And all of a sudden I was like, yes, I can do this. And she just said, come on, we're going to turn the epidural off because you're ready to push. If we can just get this baby down far enough, we might be able to get away with just a vacuum delivery. And she, yeah, it was just quite an amazing moment. Like, anyway, so it was really special. Because I was really scared of the epidural being turned off. I was like, oh, hell no. So anyway, we turned it down, and they were able to sort of get me into a supported upright position. And so I was kind of kneeling on the bed, facing against the back of the bed, and they had it up. And just pushing my heart out, trying to get this baby to move down. And at some point, baby came down enough that they wanted to do the whole, baby's ready to come out. So they did the whole stirrup thing anyway. So that's not particularly flattering. But I sort of didn't care by this point. So we'd gotten baby down far enough, and then they turned me over, or asked me to turn over. And so now I was on my, sort of in a semi-sitting, semi-reclined position with my legs up in stirrups. And it really got intense at this point, in the sense that we were all very focused on getting that baby out. And I guess there must have been some level of excitement, but there was also a lot of fear. There was still fear about the epidural having been turned off, and the sensations don't come back straight away, but I think the fear of them coming back was enough to make me just kind of freak out a little. And I just remember right at the end there, it was a classic kind of movie scene where everyone's chanting, push, 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 and I'm screaming, help me. It was not laughing, but you know what I mean? Like, it was just this, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but it was just this strange movie scene where, yeah, anyway, very classic. But one of the things that I do remember is, I mean, I was screaming, help me. And the obstetrician, who I'm sure was actually trying to help me because that's what I was screaming. But I remember her standing there and holding this pair of scissors, and obviously the surgical scissors, to do an episiotomy. And thankfully, somehow she was blocked. It seemed to me like that, because the midwife at the time, I think she just knew, she could see the baby was coming, that it's all good. But it's just this kind of chaotic moment where there's chanting, like, push, push, and I'm pushing, and I'm doing all that holding your breath and pushing thing, and screaming, help me, and there's a midwife there, and a pediatrician probably standing in the back, and like just people everywhere, and the midwife's, encouraging me, but I just, and somehow then there's this obstetrician with scissors in their hand, ready to cut me, to help me. I'm sure they were trying to help, but thankfully they were somehow blocked by all the chaos, and we got baby out. Like, he came out, and it was just, I had that moment that I think I wrote down in my journal that I just called out, oh, my baby, or something just really cliched or something, but it was just such an emotional moment that he was finally here. And I felt like, even though now I understand, you're a mother even before you give birth, you're a mother once you've conceived, but I just felt like I'm a mother now, and it was something that I was really wanted. And so I had that moment, that just absolute, emotional moment where they put your baby on your chest, and but it was fairly soon after that they kind of whisked him away, to the pediatrician and checked him up and all of that, which at the time I guess I didn't mind, but now I would mind. No one takes my baby. So that's a very precious moment. But I did have a little bit of that initial cuddle, and where we got to see, oh, he was a boy, because we've always had surprises. So we're able to see that he's a boy, and then they took him to the little table. And yeah, and I just to finish up on this story, because I don't want to take up too much time, but it left me feeling like, even though it was triumphant at the end, it really did leave me shell-shocked because of the amount of pain I experienced during the labour before the epidural. And it really, really made me question my beliefs about birth. I was really confused, because I mean, and I don't know if everyone's like this, but I know I'm a bit stubborn when it comes to beliefs. I think that most of us are. Once we have a belief, our brain does not want to let it go. So I had this belief in my subconscious that birth is natural, and you know, I had a few friends who had given birth without drugs. I had a few friends who had given birth via cesarean, but I, you know, my belief was, you know, I should be able to do this somehow, but I could not understand how I could do it, because it was such a horrendous and traumatic experience. I was like, how could anyone have more than one child? Because once you find out how horrible it is, you wouldn't want another one. Like, I was really quite traumatized. Now, when we went to the maternity ward, the same midwife that had taught our class, our antenatal class at the hospital, she came and visited. And she had sort of like poked fun. I'm sure she meant it lightheartedly, but she'd sort of poked fun at me having a notebook and pen at the antenatal class. And anyway, so I was a little bit offended at that, but, you know, tried to overlook it. But anyway, she came to visit me after I'd had the baby, and I was in the maternity ward. And she was the one that actually said, oh, you should try hypnobirthing next time. And I just thought, are you kidding me? Why didn't you tell me that at the class? Like, wasn't it obvious that you know, notebook and pen, I was really eager to learn. And I mean, maybe she didn't know about it until after. Anyway, I don't know. But I'm grateful that she told me about hypnobirthing, because that set me on my path to learn about hypnobirthing and have some amazing birth experiences. I just wish she had told me a little sooner. So I was a bit incredulous that she hadn't told me before. But yeah, the thing that I found so confusing was that I had this belief that birth was a natural event, and that we were designed to give birth. But then I had such a horrible experience. Or elements of it were horrible. And at the time, after giving birth, all I could think about was the horrible parts. Over a period of time, it's been 9 years now, I've had lots of time to reflect and process. And now I really focus on the triumphant moments, you know, the moments at the end where I really showed my inner strength. And that was my true strength that I just wasn't able to tap into earlier. But it was there all along. And even just being able to stay still while I had the epidural placed showed that I could do this. And the fact that I had actually lasted 13 hours before I had the epidural. And this is with no tools, no, known care provider, which would have been really helpful. But yeah, like, so with almost no tools, to have still lasted that long, and was just, really amazing. So I was able to sort of start to focus on the positives. But right after the birth, all I was focusing on was the negatives and how painful it was, and that I just never, ever, ever wanted to feel that again. Anyway, so I am, oh, and sorry, the last thing to mention was that, you know, I had this disconnect between what I believed birth was and what I had experienced, and it just didn't match. And I remember a nurse, she might have been a midwife, I'm not sure, but it was just someone that was on the maternity ward. And I remember her saying, like, she kind of just patted me on the shoulder or the knee or something and just said, just get the epidural next time. And she really, truly meant well. She was just trying to reassure me because I was clearly traumatized. I must have said something to her about how horrible the birth was. And she was like, don't worry, dear, just get the epidural next time. You'll be fine. And even though I know she meant well, like, that didn't help. It didn't help because, like I said, with beliefs, our beliefs are very stubborn. And I had this belief that I should be able to do it without the epidural. And it just didn't fit into my belief system. Whereas other women, they might be able to have an epidural and be quite happy having an epidural. And there's no judgment there whatsoever. But because I had this belief, I just couldn't settle for this, you know, just have the epidural, it's fine. And so when the other midwife mentioned hypnobirthing, I had that word in my head and it just stuck there. And I went, okay, that's going to be my plan if we have another one. So it was a big if at the point, at that moment, because it was all still quite raw. Thankfully, she did tell us about it because I actually did fall pregnant 4 months later. And yeah, so I booked straight into hypnobirthing the moment I found out I was pregnant. But I'll tell you about that in the next video. All right. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed listening to my birth story. That's my first birth experience with my son, Aidan, who we love a lot. And he is almost 9 now. He was our first Christmas baby, and this will be maybe our last Christmas baby. Who knows? So yeah, even though his birth wasn't ideal, after all of this time processing it, I now see all the beauty in it and the things that I learned that I don't think I could have learned any other way. And it's certainly enriched me as a mother and as a woman. It's helped me have more empathy for others who have experienced trauma or have experienced their birth as a painful traumatic event. So whilst I would never sign up for that kind of experience, and I'm not sure I could even say I'm glad I had the experience, I do know I gained so much from it and learned a lot from it. So for that, I am grateful for the learning bit. So yeah, so that's my birth story. I would love for you to share with me your birth story and how did you process it? And did you notice that it changed over time? How you felt about your birth? Did, you know, and what changed? Anyway, I'd love to hear from you. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.